I thought she was just going out with friends, until a stranger called and told me everything. That night, I learned my wife had another life, and I wasn't in it. It was a Monday afternoon, early December, when I got the phone call that flipped my entire world upside down. I picked up, and a man's voice came through, calm but serious. "Is this Greg Walker?" "Yeah, that's me," I said. "Can I help you with something?" He replied, "I'm calling because I'm the husband of Rebecca Walker. I've been getting pretty concerned lately." My stomach dropped. "Yeah, that's my wife," I said, already starting to feel uneasy. "Is something going on?" He didn't pause. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your wife's been involved with another guy. They've been meeting up at the Crossroads Lounge on Friday nights." At first, I thought it had to be some sort of cruel prank. My mind couldn't process it. "Who are you and why the heck are you calling me with this?" I asked, voice raised, more confused than angry. "This isn't a joke," he said flatly. "She's been seeing someone else, regularly. They meet at that disco bar every week." I wanted to hang up, to forget what I just heard, but something in his voice, something in the way he said it, made me freeze. I didn't want to believe it. Not Rebecca. Not my wife. But deep in my gut, a cold, sick feeling settled in. Something wasn't adding up lately, and now it all rushed in at once. "I'm not alone right now," I said, trying to hold it together. "Can you call me back in 20 minutes? "Yeah, sure," he said, and then the line went dead. I stood there, phone still in my hand, just staring at the floor like it could offer me an answer. My arms started trembling. My legs felt like jelly. Then the sweat hit me, clammy, cold, panic sweat. My heart was pounding like a jackhammer, but my thoughts were all sludge. I collapsed onto the couch, elbows on my knees, and buried my face in my hands. No way. This couldn't be real. Could it? Rebecca and I had been married for just over 6 years. We had a little girl, Emily. She turned 6 in September. That kid is our everything. We weren't exactly planning on having a baby so soon, but Rebecca was already pregnant when we tied the knot. We were just a couple of young kids trying to figure it all out. We met during the fall semester at a local community college. I was 20, she was 18. Rebecca had just started nursing school, bright-eyed and determined. I'd already done 2 years toward an accounting degree, but I fell behind a few credits, and just like that, I lost my student deferment for the draft. Vietnam was roaring at full speed, and the draft board wasn't exactly known for being forgiving. I was still living at home, working full-time every other semester just to afford tuition, and waiting for my notice to show up in the mail. Honestly, I wasn't the best student. I was restless, unfocused, and frankly, getting a little tired of the routine. I had some money saved up and figured maybe it was time to stop spinning my wheels. Maybe getting out in the world wasn't the worst thing that could happen. I remember it so clearly. I was sitting in the commons playing cards with some buddies when one of them nudged me and nodded toward the cafeteria line. "Check her out," he said, motioning with his chin. "That's Rebecca Thompson. She was 2 years behind us in high school." I looked up, and there she was, long chestnut hair, a short skirt, and legs that could stop traffic. I stared for a second too long. "She's cute," I said, probably out loud. As soon as she sat down with her tray, we walked over and my buddy introduced us. The three of us ended up talking for a bit. They knew each other from growing up in the same neighborhood, so most of the conversation was old memories and inside jokes. I didn't mind. I just listened, nodded, and stole glances at her when I thought she wouldn't notice. Eventually, she glanced at the time, stood up, gave us both a warm smile, and said she had to head to class. And just like that, she was gone. From the moment I saw her, I was hooked. There was just something about her. She stood about 5'7", probably around 115 pounds, with the kind of figure you'd expect from someone who danced often. Long limbs, graceful, the kind of presence that caught your eye even in a crowded room. Turns out, dancing was more than just a hobby for her. She'd been in a couple of high school musicals and used to perform any chance she got. Her name was Rachel, and while she didn't have that textbook magazine cover kind of beauty, she was still stunning in her own way. It wasn't just how she looked, it was how she carried herself. Confident, magnetic. That big, bright smile of hers could light up a room, and she had this natural way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person she'd ever talked to. I'd never met anyone like her. Back in high school, I was one of those quiet types, the kind who hung out with the so-called nerd crowd. I didn't put myself out there much. I wasn't exactly popular, and making new friends never came easy to me. I read a lot, probably too much, and still ended up with average grades. I wasn't lazy though. I worked hard, always had a job, pumping gas, delivering papers, whatever I could get, and I was proud of the fact that I had my own cash and a car of my own. That sense of independence meant something to me. Our second date? That one's burned into my memory. We drove out to one of those old county back roads, the kind where the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, and ended up parked just talking, and then kissing. She was so into the moment and so was I. One thing led to another and soon enough we were wrapped up tight in each other. As things started heating up, my hand started to wander and she gently pushed me back. She leaned against the door, smiled and said, "Let's talk about it first." I fumbled some half-joke, "First thing that comes up," and to my surprise she burst out laughing. I had to laugh too. That broke the tension and just like that, the moment passed. We didn't take it any further that night, but something about the way she handled it stuck with me. She wasn't just attractive, she was grounded. Honest. A little bold even. A couple weeks later I was over at her place. Her folks had already gone to bed and we started fooling around again. Things were heating up when reality hit us both square in the chest. Rachel's house was small, and with thin walls and sleeping parents, it was hard to pretend we had all the privacy in the world. But that night, things took a turn we didn't expect. She got pregnant. Neither of us had planned for it. Honestly, we were just two young people trying to figure ourselves out. The idea of becoming parents wasn't even remotely on the radar. Rachel was torn. She floated the idea of adoption, maybe going to stay with her brother and his wife down in Alabama for a while, just to hide the pregnancy and figure things out without everyone in town knowing. I told her I thought that might be a good plan, for now at least. I had a little money saved up, and once my military pay kicked in after basic training, I'd be able to send her more. We both knew this wasn't going to be easy, and the mood that night was heavy. When I dropped her off, there was no kiss goodnight, no long hug. Just silence. That was rare for us. Rachel went to see a doctor a few days later to confirm everything. And soon after, we started talking about what we were going to do. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about all of us. Her family? They weren't exactly what you'd call stable. I mean, they weren't cruel to me or anything, but there was a rough edge to them that never quite sat right. Her dad, brother, and brother-in-law all worked factory jobs, spent their evenings with a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and had reputations for cheating, brawling, and neglecting their families. Her mom and sister mostly seemed to be stuck cleaning up after the chaos. Rachel was the youngest, and in a way she dodged some of the worst parts of that household. She never picked up their taste for drinking, and she had this quiet determination not to end up like them. I respected that. We didn't set a wedding date right away. I needed to know where I was going to be stationed after training. But once that was decided, it felt like we could finally exhale. We weren't happy about the timing, but we were trying. We were in this together, and for the first time in a while we could breathe. Was it love? I believed it was. I couldn't imagine not being with her. In that moment, nothing else mattered. I caught my parents just as they were getting ready to head out for church that Sunday morning. Figured I'd better get the hard conversation out of the way. Breaking the news wasn't easy, but to be honest, it helped knowing my older brother had already paved the way a bit. He got his girlfriend pregnant a couple years before and ended up marrying her. It had been rocky for a while in our family after that, but eventually things smoothed out. That gave me hope they'd come around with Rachel and me too. Around that time, I was in the Army doing my advanced training at Fort Leonard Wood. Compared to a lot of the guys I trained with, I had it easy. While they were out sweating under the sun, I worked in a cool-down office pushing papers. Mostly typing reports and organizing files. Glorified clerk, really, but I wasn't complaining. Time moved fast, and 6 weeks in, I received my orders. I was heading to Germany. I couldn't believe my luck. Almost every guy I knew from training was getting shipped off to Vietnam, but somehow I dodged that bullet. Germany felt like a dream in comparison. I was granted a short delay before reporting to my new post, which gave me 10 unexpected days back home. Rachel was 6 months pregnant by then, still glowing, and somehow even more stunning than before. She had this natural beauty that never let up. And man, she was insatiable. We made the most of those nights, like our own little honeymoon we never got to have. Those 10 days were a blur of laughter, midnight talks, and lovemaking that felt more like rediscovering each other than anything else. When I got to Germany, we picked up right where we left off. I'd spend my days doing what the Army told me to, and my nights wrapped up in Rachel's arms. She was passionate, spontaneous, and we barely let a night go by without being together. I memorized every inch of her body, the way she moved, the softness of her skin, the curves I still can't get out of my head. After Maddie was born, she snapped back into shape so quickly it was almost unreal. Sure, her hips had a little more curve, her chest had filled out some, but she still looked like the woman I fell for in that college cafeteria line years ago. She used to complain her breasts were too small, but to me she was perfect. And the truth? There wasn't a stretch mark on her. I used to wonder how I got so lucky. Rachel loved to dance. On weekends, we'd hit up local clubs or base bars, and after a couple drinks, she'd drag me onto the dance floor. I wasn't exactly smooth, typical rhythm-lacking white boy, but when it came to slow dancing, I was all in. Holding her close, moving to the music with her in my arms, it made me feel like I belonged. But fast dancing? That was all her. She had this fire when she danced, hips swaying, eyes locked on mine. She could steal the spotlight without even trying. Dressed to kill and full of life, she turned heads every time we stepped out. I used to look around the room and think, yep, she's with me, and that thought alone would make my chest puff a little. After a night out like that, I'd be counting the minutes to get her home. The way she moved, the way she laughed, it was intoxicating. It never got old. Later, when I came back stateside, I started taking advantage of the VA education benefits. That helped keep us afloat for a bit. Early on, I started hanging out with a guy named Jake from my job. We'd hit up happy hour most Fridays to unwind after work. It became a bit of a tradition. Jake and his buddy Craig were regulars, both construction guys, tough as nails and heavy into their beer. Honestly, I was never much of a drinker. Couple of mixed drinks and I was good. Just enough to catch a buzz and enjoy the music. Turns out Jake and Craig were also serious players when they had the chance. Always on the lookout, always chasing the next woman to charm. I never quite fit in with that crowd in that way, but I tagged along. It was harmless fun, or so I thought back then. Just a few drinks, maybe dance with someone if Rachel wasn't around, then head home. But slowly those Fridays started changing, and not in ways I expected. Most Fridays I'd get home from happy hour around 7, maybe 8. I didn't go overboard, just a couple drinks with the guys from work to take the edge off. By the time I walked through the door, Rachel would be getting ready to head out. She'd kiss Maddie on the forehead, throw on something that made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover, and tell me she was meeting the girls at one of the clubs downtown. That had become our routine. I stayed home with Maddie while Rachel danced the night away. It started around the same time she got into the whole disco scene. That's when she suddenly became obsessed with the idea of getting breast implants. One of our old neighbors, a woman about her age, had recently had them done. Rachel couldn't stop talking about it, how good she looked, how confident she seemed afterward. It was like a switch flipped in her and she decided she wanted the same. I didn't think much of it at the time. I chalked it up to wanting to feel better in her own skin. Maybe it was tied to her job, she'd just gotten promoted, and it seemed like she was focused on reinventing herself, looking the part, whatever that meant. But then came the call. The one that rattled every corner of my brain. I can still hear the man's voice on the other end of the line, clear as day. She's been seeing a guy named Dean Barrett for a few months now. They'd been meeting at that disco down by the water. Just hearing a name, that made it real. Dean. A living, breathing person suddenly inserted into my marriage. How do you even know this? I asked, half angry, half dazed. He gave a humorless laugh. They're not exactly subtle. That whole crowd down there? Everyone knows. They act like it's nothing. My mind went into a tailspin, confusion, fury, denial, back to panic, all in seconds. Why are you even telling me this? I snapped. Are you mad at him? Or are you just trying to mess with me because Rachel turned you down? That got under his skin. I'm not making this up, man. Dean's smooth, charming, and yeah, he makes good money. He's got a reputation too. I swallowed hard. Anything else you know about them? He hesitated, then added, look, from what I've heard, Dean's not exactly new to this game. Your wife isn't the first woman he's taken an interest in. But she is the first he's ever bragged about, like really talked about, like he's actually in love with her. My stomach twisted. That man was talking about my wife. I wanted to be sick. I can't believe this, I muttered, my voice shaking. Rachel's not like that. He paused. I'm sorry, man. I really am. But you need to know. After we hung up, the silence in the house was suffocating. I looked over at Maddie, sitting on the floor playing with her dolls, completely oblivious to the storm blowing through our lives. How could I tell her? How could I even begin to understand it myself? Things had already been off between Rachel and me. She'd started dressing differently, more polished, more put together, like she was always on display. She talked less about going up to my parents' cabin on the weekends, even though that used to be her favorite place to unplug. And anytime I tried to share what was going on at the job site or how the business was holding up, she seemed distracted, like none of it mattered anymore. That night, while she was still out, I sat on the couch with a phone book in my lap. I flipped through until I found it. Barrett, Dean, and Paula listed over in Woodridge, one of the nicer suburbs just outside town. My chest tightened. Seeing his name in print made it all too real. I scribbled down the address and number, hands slightly shaking. I needed answers. Real ones. And I wasn't going to get them from whispered rumors or anonymous calls. No, the truth had to come from Rachel herself. I had 3 days to get ready, 3 days before she went out again that Friday night. I knew I had 3 days. That was it. And I had to make those days count. I couldn't let this hang over me like a storm cloud. It was already gnawing at my gut, keeping me up at night. I needed answers, clear ones, and a plan I could actually act on. If this confrontation was going to happen, I had to go into it prepared, not just emotionally but legally too. So I picked up the phone and called someone I trusted, an old high school buddy, Ryan, who had just finished law school. He was clerking for a local judge while waiting to take the bar exam. I told him as vaguely as I could that I needed to talk to someone about a family issue, and he didn't press. He gave me the name of a seasoned attorney he'd interned with, Paul Donovan, and told me he'd give him a heads up that I'd be calling. Friday morning came faster than I expected. I met with Paul at his downtown office. The place had that faint smell of paper and old leather, and the moment I sat down, I felt the weight of what I was doing settle into my chest. I told him everything, at least, everything I knew up to that point. I didn't hold back. Paul listened carefully, nodding now and then before asking his first question. Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation? I took a breath. Maybe, I said. But that depends on what happens tonight. Depends on what I see, what I hear from her. Right now, I'm not holding my breath. He nodded again and explained that since we lived in a no-fault state, the reasons for the breakup wouldn't matter much in court. But, he added, proof of infidelity can still be useful, especially when it comes to custody or dividing assets. That hit me harder than I expected. Just hearing the word custody, like I might somehow lose part of Maddie too, shook something loose in me. That night, everything was set. Rachel got dressed like it was just another Friday night, just another night out with the girls. I watched her move through the house, calm, smiling like nothing was wrong. Right before she stepped out the front door, she paused. She turned to look at me with this strange expression. Like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. I held her gaze, but she turned away before a word left her lips. Then the door opened and she was gone. I waited. Gave it 15 minutes, enough time for her car to fade out of earshot. Then I picked up the phone and called the babysitter I had already arranged earlier in the week. Her name was Caroline. Maddie loved her. Always had. Hey Caroline, can you be here in about 20 minutes? I asked. Absolutely, she said, cheerful as ever. Once she arrived, I sat down with Maddie. Hey sweetheart, I said, kneeling beside her. How would you like Caroline to hang out with you tonight while I run out for a little bit? She grinned and clapped. Yay. I kissed her on the forehead. You be my brave girl, all right? 10 minutes later, I was in the driveway pulling the brim of my cap down low. I figured if I stayed in the shadows, maybe I wouldn't stick out too much. The club crowd was always a little flashy anyway, big collars, loud shirts, lots of perfume and cheap cologne. I wore a long coat and kept the camera slung around my neck, tucked just beneath the fabric. The place was buzzing when I arrived. Lights flashing, music thumping through the walls. I paid the cover without making eye contact, made my way straight to the bar and ordered a Coke. No alcohol tonight, I needed my head clear. I scanned the room through lowered eyes. If they were there for the dancing, they'd be close to the floor near the DJ booth. And that's exactly where I found them. Rachel. My wife. Wrapped around Dean Barrett like he was the only man left on earth. They were laughing, touching, holding each other with a familiarity that no girl's night out could explain away. I stood in the shadows, numb, my fingers moving without thinking as I took a few quick, quiet photos. I didn't want to, but I needed to remind myself later this wasn't a nightmare. That it happened. That she gave herself away to another man. The moment it hit me fully, that there was no walking this back, I took a piece of paper from my coat pocket. I'd written it earlier that day, not even sure I'd use it. Just a simple message in thick, unmistakable letters. Don't come home tonight. I don't want to see you. The doors will be locked. Go to your mother's. I folded it once, slid it into my wallet and walked out without looking back. It was over. Before I met Rachel, I'd never even raised my voice to her, not once. All I'd ever felt toward her was love, plain and simple. Even through our rough patches, I always believed in us. I truly did. About 20 minutes after I left that note, I heard the front door creak open. I was sitting in the kitchen, hunched over some paperwork at the table, though I wasn't really getting anything done. From where I was, I had a clear view into the entryway. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around the house like she was expecting someone else. Like maybe she was hoping Maddie would come running to greet her. But the house was quiet. Rachel set her coat down on the arm of the couch, then turned and saw me sitting there at the dining table, briefcase open, files out, trying to act like I wasn't unraveling inside. We just looked at each other. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. Then she broke the silence. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." She closed her eyes and started shaking her head, almost like she was trying to block out the moment itself. "God," she muttered, "I never thought it would come to this." I looked straight at her. "What? You didn't think cheating would come back to bite you? Or you just didn't think you'd get caught?" My voice was low, calm, too calm. "Because let's be honest, I think we both know which one it is." That's when the sobs started. Quiet at first, then deeper, more gut-wrenching. I didn't rush her. I just waited. I needed to hear the truth, and if it was going to come out between tears, so be it. Finally, I asked, "Tell me about Dean Barrett." She sniffled, wiped at her face, and picked up the glass of water I'd left out for her. She took a sip, then said just above a whisper, "I met Dean at the club. He was part of the usual crowd we sat with. We danced a lot, and I don't know, it just happened." "Rachel," I said, shaking my head, "don't you get it? You didn't just get caught. You were exposed. There are no more secrets. People told me things. People I didn't want to believe. I gave you the benefit of the doubt for years. But I can't ignore it anymore." She looked stunned. Like the world she had built behind my back was suddenly collapsing, piece by piece. Then I asked about the weekend she bailed on our trip up north, said she was working, remember? She wrapped her arms around herself like she was freezing. "Dean has a sailboat," she said. "It's docked over in Saginaw. He invited me, Connie, and this guy she's been seeing to go out for the weekend. You were already supposed to be helping your parents at the cabin, so I figured it wouldn't hurt." Her voice cracked. Her eyes kept darting around the room like she was searching for a version of this conversation where I'd let her off the hook. I leaned in. "Don't do this. Don't try to lie again. It won't work. I've heard things about you for a long time. Things I chose not to believe. I defended you. I shut down anyone who even hinted that you weren't who I thought you were." Rachel slumped into the chair across from me, her whole body heavy like the weight of her choices had finally landed. "Tell me everything," I said quietly. "Now." Her voice dropped again, barely audible. "He wanted me," she started. "But I told him I couldn't. I was on my period. He said he didn't care, said he was too worked up. He grabbed my hand and..." She trailed off. I sat there frozen. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. But I just stared at her. "And you did it anyway?" I asked, numb. She didn't respond. My heart sank even further. This wasn't just some emotional affair. This wasn't something that happened once and got out of hand. It was deeper, messier, and uglier than I'd imagined. She looked up and for the first time seemed truly ashamed, not just sorry she got caught. "I don't know why I did it," she said, voice hollow. I didn't answer. I couldn't. There weren't words for what I felt. All I knew was the woman sitting across from me wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe she had been all along, and I just hadn't seen it. The room went silent again. Rachel had buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. After a while, the crying stopped and she didn't move anymore. She just sat there, still and silent. Maybe asleep. Maybe just empty. Me. I sat there in the same chair, staring at the woman I used to love, wondering how long it had been since she stopped loving me. I sat there in complete silence, dazed, staring into nothing. My mind was spinning, but my body felt like it was made of stone. After who knows how long, I finally stood up, walked over, and gently shook her arm. "Rachel," I said quietly, "get up. Go shower. Get cleaned up." She didn't respond at first, just sat there like a statue. Then slowly, like she was moving through mud, she pushed herself up from the chair. She didn't look at me, not once. Just shuffled down the hall, eyes fixed on the floor, and disappeared into the bathroom. A few seconds later, I heard the shower turn on. That's when I reached into my briefcase and turned off the recorder I'd hidden earlier. I don't even know why I did it, maybe for clarity later, maybe just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined what I'd heard. But the weight of it all suddenly came crashing down. My legs went weak. I stumbled out of the kitchen and flung open the sliding glass door, needing air, needing to break the spell that had settled over me like a fog. When she finally came back out, she stood there with damp hair, still avoiding my eyes. Then, like she was reading a script, she said, "Dean and I, we share things. Music, dancing, passion. Things you were never part of. Things you never seemed to care about." I just blinked at her, trying to make sense of it. "That's your reason?" I asked slowly, stunned. "That's your justification for stepping out on your husband?" For throwing away your vows? I shook my head, fingers tracing slow circles on the edge of the table. By the time you got involved with him, Rachel, we already had a life together. A daughter. A home. And now you're saying it was moot? She said nothing. Just kept her eyes on the table. So what now? I asked, voice low. Do you want to keep seeing him? Is that what you're saying? Again, nothing. Just silence. And I'm supposed to sit here while you carry on with him like I don't exist? Still she didn't answer. I leaned back, the room suddenly feeling colder than it was. All right, I said finally. This is going to go one of two ways. She looked up at me, eyes red and empty. I can pack a bag and walk out that door tonight. I'll ask my parents if I can stay with them for a while. But if I do that, I'll have to tell them why. And tomorrow, one of us will have to explain to Maddie why Daddy doesn't live here anymore. When I said Maddie's name, Rachel winced. Shivered like the air had turned icy. Or, we can wait until after Christmas. 3 weeks. We do what we can to give our daughter a normal holiday. I'll move into the basement. We keep things calm for her sake. And then, once the holidays are behind us, we figure out the next step. She just stared down at the table again. She didn't object. Didn't agree. She just sank into silence. Eventually, she got up and walked down the hall to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She didn't come out again that morning. Later that day, I made good on what I'd said. I dragged an old mattress downstairs, moved some clothes and a few essentials into the basement. Cleaned up the clutter down there to make it halfway livable. I found an old area rug, dusted off the battered TV, and spliced into the cable to at least have something to watch when the nights got too quiet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My exile. My space. The next week was a blur of logistics. I stayed busy with work, tried to be present for Maddie, kept up the charade for her sake. One day I brought some papers over to my business partner, John. Year-end stuff. Payroll. Tax forms. I handed him a few envelopes. The W-2s are prepped to be mailed after New Year's. I've signed mine. The rest are here, you'll need to handle those. He nodded. But I wasn't done. I've got something else too, I said, locking eyes with him. Here's a notarized letter of resignation. Effective today. John froze. I'm stepping away as an officer of the company. That includes any voting rights or formal ownership. I pulled another paper from my folder. And this, I said, sliding it over, is a signed receipt, $2,500. Paid out to me in exchange for any and all remaining interest I had in the business. That includes common stock and anything else tied to my role. John sat there speechless. But me? I felt something shift. I was finally starting to let go. Looking back, I realize now how foolish I was to take my eye off things for so long. I'd been so focused on work, on bills, on just surviving day to day, that I'd stopped paying attention to what was happening right under my nose. And by the time I did, it was too late. Well, Pat, I said over coffee, I'm not sure if I should say thank you or I'm sorry. Maybe both. She gave me a tired smile. When your wife was busted, she said gently, did she also try the whole open marriage pitch? I nodded slowly. Yeah. She said it like it was this bold new idea. Like we could just reset everything. Said that's what you and Dean had. But I couldn't even wrap my head around it. That's not living, it's giving up. Pat tilted her head, studying me carefully. Do you have proof? She asked. I do, I said, pulling my briefcase onto the table. I have her recorded confession. And I've got photos from the club. Nothing graphic but enough. Them dancing. Holding each other. Kissing. Pat closed her eyes for a second, like she was bracing for a wave she'd seen coming. Dean's always been magnetic, she said quietly. But I think he's got a hole in him no one can fill. She was attractive, tall, slim, maybe mid-30s. Blonde hair, very professional. She had that poised energy of someone who's lived through disappointment and is still trying to stay dignified. As we waited for our food, I gave her the short version, how I'd met Rachel, how we built a life together, how we had Maddie. Her expression changed when I mentioned our daughter. You have a child? She said, eyes widening. Yeah, I replied. 6 years old. Maddie's our whole world. She shook her head slowly. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. We talked more. She told me about how she and Dean met back in college, how she was a couple of years ahead of him. And as she shared more, I started to hear something familiar in her voice. A tiredness. A sadness. Maybe even guilt. Maybe, just maybe, she was carrying some of the same pain I was. Back at home, things had gone cold between Rachel and me. She stopped trying to talk about our marriage. I shut her down every time. Eventually she gave up. We stuck to logistics, Maddie, groceries, bills, chores. I told her I'd joined the National Guard, and that I was done with construction. She didn't ask any questions. Later I got the ball rolling with the attorney. I told him to proceed with filing. The fallout came slow and awkward. Rachel must have told her sister because there were some tense, uncomfortable encounters during the holidays. My mom noticed something was wrong too. She pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Rachel looks thin. Well, is everything okay?" I shrugged. "She's been fighting a bug," I said. I don't think Mom believed me, but she didn't push it. We made it through Christmas somehow. Maddie had a beautiful day. We went all out for her like we always did. And I tried, really tried, to savor every second with her. It was probably the last time we'd ever have Christmas as a full family. I wanted it to matter. Right after Christmas, I landed a second-shift temp job through a contact in the trade union. It wasn't permanent, but it paid twice what unemployment would. That would get me through for now. I was due to start the first week of January. New Year's Eve came, but I didn't feel like celebrating. I didn't even want to be in the same house. Every glance, every breath Rachel took near me made me sick and made me ache. I loved her, and I hated her. Some nights I didn't know which feeling was stronger. Things came to a head after the new year. Rachel's mother called, furious. She accused me of being heartless, of ripping her granddaughter away. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just hung up the phone. The judge didn't need much convincing. After reviewing everything, the photos, the confession, the patterns, custody was awarded to me. Rachel was ordered into rehabilitation and required to complete a psychological evaluation. Her emotional health had spiraled, and she needed serious help. She was released from the hospital a few weeks later and admitted into a rehab facility. I never saw her again. As for the others, Dean lost his company, ran it into the ground and filed for bankruptcy. Craig, another regular from their little circle, got into a bad accident. Left him disabled for life. And Kim Machado, one of the women Rachel used to go dancing with, was killed in a car crash just a few months after everything came undone. The whole world they built behind my back, it collapsed on itself. But Maddie and I, we made it out. Barely.